Answer me honestly before God. Did you touch her?
Yes, and I never repented for it.
After listening, please subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment before we continue. Morning in Pennsylvania began quietly, just like every day in our community. The sun was only peeking over the horizon, casting soft golden light across the fields where wheat swayed in the light breeze. I, Eli, stood by the window of our wooden house, breathing in the familiar smell of freshly cut grass and warm bread drifting from the kitchen. Mother was already clattering pots, making breakfast for the whole family. Today was special, my 16th birthday, and with it came a time I both awaited and feared. My RUMSPRINGA, the season when Amish youth may try life outside among what we call the English, meaning non-Amish people. I stood in my room holding a pair of jeans my cousin Amos had lent me. They were heavy, rough to the touch, nothing like my usual homespun trousers mother sewed by hand. The fabric smelled different, not of home or field, but of something foreign, like a world I did not yet know. I hesitated to put them on. In our community, clothes do not stand out. Plain shirts, suspenders, straw hats. The jeans felt sinful to me, though I could not say why. Maybe because of how they fit my legs when I finally dared to pull them on, or because they made me feel different. Eli, breakfast is ready, Mother called from the kitchen. Her voice was warm, with a faint thread of worry. She knew that today I would take my first step toward RUMSPRINGA. In our community, this was the time when youth could try life in the world of the English, as we called outsiders. Some returned, some did not. I had heard stories of those who lost themselves in the city, in its lights and noise, and that frightened me. But the thought of staying here forever, never learning what lay beyond our fields, frightened me even more. I went down to the kitchen, where Father, my younger sisters Ruth and Esther, and little Samuel were already seated, Samuel slurping milk noisily from a wooden bowl. Mother set a plate before me with eggs and a thick slice of bread heavy with butter. She looked at me, and I saw her eyes pause on the jeans. She said nothing, only sighed and turned back to the stove. "Are you sure, Eli?" Father asked without lifting his eyes from his coffee. His voice was low and calm, but I could feel its weight. He did not like RUMSPRINGA, though he did not forbid me. "You know our path is God's path. The world out there, it tempts, but it is empty." "I know, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Inside, though, I was lost. I loved our community, its quiet, its order. I loved the smell of hay, the rhythm of work in the fields, the evening prayers when we all sat together reading the Bible. But lately something new had been growing in me, a kind of hunger I could not name. It was like a whisper calling me beyond the line of our land to a world I had seen only in fragments. Cars passing our farm, music flowing from open windows, and lights glowing at night far beyond the end of our fields. After breakfast, I helped Samuel hitch the horse to the wagon. We were going into town to sell a few sacks of potatoes and some eggs. It was my last day before I would head to Lancaster, where Amos had promised to show me real life. Samuel chattered about his friends and how he could not wait to be old enough for RUMSPRINGA too. I listened, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I pictured stepping onto paved streets, hearing horns, seeing people who lived without our rules. In town, I felt for the first time that the outside world was closer than I had thought. Samuel and I stopped at a store where the English bought our goods. A girl about my age stood there in a bright red jacket, earbuds in her ears. She smiled at me when I handed her a basket of eggs. Her smile was open and easy, and my face suddenly burned. I looked away, but my heart hammered as if I had run a mile. "She caught your eye, huh?" Samuel teased when we walked off. He snickered, but I only grumbled something back. I was ashamed, not because of what he said, but because of how badly I wanted to know what music was playing in her ears. When we returned home, the sun was setting and the sky over the fields turned crimson. I sat on the porch holding a small radio Amos had left me the week before. He said it was just to try. I was afraid to turn it on, but curiosity was stronger. I hid behind the shed where no one could see me and pressed the button. At first there was only static and then music. Loud, quick, with a beat I had never heard. My fingers trembled as I turned the dial, catching different voices, songs, words that blurred into a rush that felt chaotic and somehow alive. I clicked it off as fast as if it could burn me, but the sound stayed in my head like an echo. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the morning. Amos would pick me up in his truck, an old pickup he had bought during his own RUMSPRINGA. He had told me about the city, about movie theaters, about stores where you could buy anything, about people who live as if every day is a celebration. His words sounded like a fairy tale, but I could not shake the feeling that wanting that life was a sin. Eli, are you saying your prayers? Mother's voice came from the hall. She always checked whether I had done my evening prayer. Yes, Mom, I answered, though it was not true. I could not pray. Words I knew by heart suddenly felt empty. I feared God saw my confusion, my doubts. More than that, I feared he saw how badly I wanted to know what lay beyond our quiet. When I finally slept, I dreamed I stood in the middle of a city where lights shone brighter than stars and people moved so fast I could not make them out. In that dream I was alone, yet I felt no fear. I felt alive. When I woke, my heart was pounding just as it had when I heard that music. Tomorrow I would go to Lancaster. Whatever awaited me there, I knew one thing. The silence of our life was no longer the only thing calling me. Lancaster greeted me with car horns and the smell of sun-warmed asphalt. I stood on the sidewalk with the old cloth bag Mother had given me for market errands. Amos dropped me at the station and said he would be back in a few hours. His pickup rattled off, and I was left alone, wrapped in a bustle that felt foreign and magnetic. People hurried past without noticing me, their voices blending into a hum I had never heard in our community. I felt as if I had stepped into a river that was carrying me somewhere I was not ready to go. I was supposed to buy yarn for Mother and nails for Father, but my feet carried me not toward the market, but down a narrow street where, Amos said, there was a cafe. He had mentioned it in passing, laughing that they served coffee that costs more than our week's wages. I had not planned to go, but something pulled me curiosity, or that same hunger that had followed me from home. The cafe was called the Green Pot, small with big windows pouring in sunlight. Inside it smelled of coffee and fresh pastries. Flower paintings and old bicycles hung on the walls. I stopped at the door, not knowing what to do. In our community, we did not go to places like this. We drank coffee at home brewed in a copper pot. Here, everything was different. Loud machines hissed. People sat at little tables holding shiny boxes I guessed were phones. Hey, you going in or just standing there? A voice came from behind me. I turned and saw a girl at the counter wiping her hands on a green apron. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and a faint smile played on her face as if she knew something I did not. Her dark brown eyes watched me with curiosity, not judgment. I'm just looking, I muttered, heat rushing to my cheeks. My jeans, which had felt bold at home, now seemed foolish next to her bright t-shirt with words I did not understand. Well, if you're just looking, you can look from inside, she said, nodding toward the door. I'm Lauren, by the way. What's your name? Eli, I said, stepping in. I did not know why I answered so quickly, but her voice was so easy I could not help it. Eli, she repeated, tasting my name. You're not local, are you? Your look is, let's say, a little old-fashioned. I flushed, unsure whether that was a compliment or a joke. She noticed my unease and laughed, not loudly, but in a way that eased the tightness inside me. Relax, I do not bite. Want coffee? We've got latte, cappuccino, espresso, or just plain black if you do not like fuss. I did not know what latte or cappuccino were, so I nodded at black. Lauren turned to a machine that hissed like an angry snake, and a minute later she set a hot cup in front of me. I sat by a window feeling like a stranger, but her presence somehow calmed me. So where are you from, Eli? She asked, sitting across from me, though I had not asked her to. She held a clear cup with something cold and colorful and a straw poking from the lid. From the community, I said carefully. I did not want to say Amish, because I had heard the English often laugh at us. Not far from here, a farm. "Oh, a farm boy," she said, eyes lighting up. "That's cool. I always dreamed of living somewhere with cows and quiet. Here in the city, it is loud all the time. Cars, people, music. By the way, do you listen to music?" I froze, holding the cup. Music. I remembered the little radio behind the shed and the lightning-like jolt of that sound. But I could not tell her the truth. "Not really," I mumbled, looking away. "Oh, come on, seriously?" Lauren leaned closer, and I caught a light, sweet scent of her perfume. "Everybody listens to music, unless you are from some super secret sect where it is banned." She laughed, then stopped when she saw my face. "Wait, did I guess right? Are you really from one of those?" I did not know how to answer. I wanted to run, but her eyes held me like a magnet. She was not mocking me the way I had feared. She looked at me with real curiosity, as if I were a book she wanted to read. "We just have different rules," I said at last. "But I am here to, well, to see how others live." "Rumspringa, right?" she said, and I flinched. How did she know? "Don't be surprised, I have seen a few like you. You come into town looking like you just landed from another planet and try to figure out how this crazy world works. You know what? It is not as scary as it seems." She told me about herself. Lauren was 17, working at the cafe to save for college. She loved superhero movies, listened to music called indie, and dreamed of going to California one day where, she said, the sun shines all year. Her words flowed easily, and I listened, forgetting my coffee until it went cold. She talked about freedom, choosing who to be, what to love, where to go. In our community, there was no such thing. We knew who we would be: farmers, carpenters, mothers, fathers. But her words made me wonder whether I truly wanted what had been set out for me. The next day, I told Amos I was going to the market, but instead I went back to the green pot. Lauren was there, and this time she suggested I try something called a frappuccino. It was sweet and cold, and I felt like a child sneaking a forbidden treat. We talked for hours about her favorite songs, about how she once snuck out to a concert, about how she hated waking up early but loved watching people in the cafe. I told her about our life milking cows, singing hymns during prayers, what the fields look like at dawn. She listened as if it were extraordinary, and for the first time I felt my life could be interesting to someone else. Each day I lied to Amos that I was going to the market. Each day I went to Lauren. Her smile became a beacon in this foreign world, and at the same time my guilt grew. I knew lying was a sin. I knew that talking with Lauren, her laughter, the brush of her hand on mine when she laughed, this was dangerous. But I could not stop. Her world was loud, chaotic, full of temptations, yet it was alive. Standing on the border between two worlds, I felt my heart pulled apart by the silence of my community and the voice calling me to stay. Evening in Lancaster smelled of wet asphalt and distant thunder rumbling beyond the horizon. I followed Lauren down narrow streets where puddles reflected the dim glow of street lamps. She tugged me by the hand, her laughter ringing in the damp air, raindrops bright on her cheeks, making her look like someone from a story I had never heard. We ran, ducking under awnings of closed shops, and I could not take my eyes off her. Her wet hair clung to her face, and there was a lightness in her movements unknown in my world, where every step is measured and every act deliberate. "Eli, have you ever danced in the rain?" she called, stopping beneath an old lamp that cast soft, warm light over her. Her eyes sparked with a kind of fire that made me forget everything: our community, my parents, the rules that kept my life in strict lines. "Danced," I repeated, the word stuck in my throat. "We do not dance. Dancing is considered vanity, a temptation pulling hearts from God. We do not do that." "Oh, come on, it is easy." Lauren grabbed my hands and spun me like we were in one of those movies she loved to talk about. I tried to resist, but her laughter was stronger than my doubts. My feet began to move with her steps, and for a moment it seemed the rain was music, and we were part of it. My shirt was soaked, my jeans clung to my legs, but I did not feel cold, only the warmth of her palms and a rhythm humming in my blood. We stopped when she stumbled on the curb, and I barely caught her. We stood so close I could see raindrops on her eyelashes. Her breath was warm, and the easy lightness in her eyes was gone. There was something more serious there, something that made my heart clench with fear, and with something I did not have a name for. "Eli," she said softly, her voice hardly rising above the rain, "have you ever thought about what it would be like to just live, without all this, without the rules, without the bans, just being who you want to be?" Her words cut through me like a blade. I had thought about it night after night in the small room at Amos's house where I stayed during RUMSPRINGA. I pictured not getting up at dawn to feed livestock, not saying a prayer before every meal, not fearing that my thoughts might be sinful. But I could not speak it aloud, not to her, not to myself. "I do not know who I am without it," I said, staring at a puddle at our feet where the lamp's light rippled. My words sounded weak, as if I did not believe them. Lauren stepped closer and touched my cheek with her fingers. The light touch burned like a hot stove. I froze, unsure where to put my hands, unsure what to say. In our community, no one touches like that openly, without shame, without permission. I knew I should step back, but my feet felt rooted. "You can be anyone, Eli," she said, gentle but firm, as if trying to wake something in me I was afraid to see. "You do not have to live the way you were told. You can choose." She leaned in, and I knew what would happen. Her lips were close enough that I felt her breath, and everything in me screamed, "Run." I jerked back so fast she swayed. Her eyes widened, but I gave her no time to speak. I turned and ran, not looking back, through the rain, through the dark streets that suddenly felt strange and threatening. My lungs burned, my heart pounded, and one thought hammered in my head: I had almost sinned. I ran until I reached Amos's house on the edge of town. My shoes splashed through puddles, my shirt stuck to my skin, but I did not stop. What had happened felt too big, too dangerous. In our community, kissing before marriage is forbidden, and I had been a breath away from breaking not just that rule, but everything that held my life together. Guilt flooded me like the unending rain. Inside, I found Amos at the table, flipping through an old newspaper by the light of a kerosene lamp. His face looked calm but alert. He looked up, and I felt his gaze pass through me. "You look like wolves were after you," he said, setting the paper aside. His voice was even, but I knew he saw more than I wanted to show. "Just rain," I muttered, avoiding his eyes. "I am tired. I am going to bed." He nodded, though I felt he did not believe me. I went upstairs, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, still wet and shaking. My thoughts swarmed like a hive of bees. I knew my Rumspringa was ending. Amos had told me yesterday I needed to decide go back to the community or stay in this English world where everything was possible and everything felt wrong. The time of freedom was closing, and I had to choose a path that would shape my life. I thought about Lauren, her laughter, her dreams, the heat that shot through me when she touched my hand. She did not know that every gesture, every word of hers was a test for me. For her, that rainy night was only an adventure, a moment she might forget in a few days. For me, it was a line I was not allowed to cross. But I also could not stop wondering what it would be like to stay, to follow her, to allow myself to feel what I was so afraid to feel. Earlier that evening, when we sat under the awning of an old bookstore, hiding from the rain, Lauren had told me about her life, her mother working nights at the hospital, her brother dreaming of becoming an engineer, her plan to open a cafe serving only her favorite drinks with music she would choose. Her words were full of life and full of choice, and I listened while my world split at the seams. In my world, there was no choice, only duty, only a path set for us before we were born. "And what do you want, Eli?" she had asked then, looking at me as if the answer mattered. "Not what they tell you to do, not what they expect. What do you want?" I did not answer. I did not know. My whole life I had done what was right, worked the fields, attended prayers, listened to sermons. Now, standing at the doorway of another world, I had no answer. I wanted to be with Lauren, to hear her voice, to feel again the heat that rushed through me when she touched my hand. But I also wanted to go home to quiet, to order, to God I feared betraying. Rain tapped against the window, and I imagined Lauren still out there, laughing and calling to me. But I knew I would not go to her. Not tonight. Maybe never. I lay down without undressing and stared into the dark. Rumspringa was ending, and I had to choose. I was not ready. My thoughts tore between two worlds, and I felt my heart crack as I failed to choose between the freedom that beckoned and the home that waited. A month in Lancaster passed like a dream I could not fully understand. Each day I woke thinking of Lauren, her laugh, her gaze, her light touch that marked me like a hot rivet. I avoided her. After that night in the rain, after almost crossing the line, I could not make myself return to the green pot. Shame burned in me like coals. I was afraid to see her eyes, afraid they would pull me back into the whirlpool I was trying so hard to escape. I spent my days wandering the market and helping Amos, but every time I passed the narrow street where the cafe stood, my heart squeezed. I told myself I was doing what was right. I must go back to the community, to the life I knew, to the God waiting for my repentance. But before leaving the city, I realized I could not go without saying goodbye. It felt like a debt I owed not to her, but to myself. I stood before the mirror in the small room at Amos's, looking at myself in jeans and a shirt that no longer felt so foreign. My hands shook as I combed my hair back, trying to look like someone who belonged in this world, if only for a moment. I knew this would be the last time I allowed myself to be here, in the world of the English. Tomorrow I would return to the community, to the fields, to the quiet that had been my home. When I stepped into the green pot, Lauren was at the counter in her green apron and loose ponytail. She looked up surprised for a heartbeat, then her face lit with the same smile that made my heart beat faster. "Eli, you are alive," she said, wiping her hands on the apron. Her voice was light, but I heard a note of hurt. "I thought you ran off for good." I did not run," I lied, the words dragging out of me. "Just a lot to do." She nodded, though her eyes said she did not believe it. She came from behind the counter and stopped close enough that I smelled her perfume, the same sweet scent that had haunted my memory. "You are leaving, aren't you?" she asked softly, no blame in her voice, only sadness. "Back to your community?" I nodded, unable to say it aloud. She looked at me, and I felt everything I had tried to hide break loose. I could not go without telling her the truth. "Lauren," I began, my voice shaking, You were like a door to another world for me. I will never forget it. But I cannot stay. This is not my place." She was quiet, and I saw tears glint that she tried to hold back. I do not know what made me do it, fear I would never feel this again, or the need to leave something of myself behind. I stepped to her, took her face in my hands, and kissed her. Her lips were soft and warm, and the world vanished. Heat swept my body, a pull stronger than anything I had known. I wanted her, not just her smile or her words, but all of her, the way a man wants a woman. It frightened me. I pulled back, feeling the fire of sin already in my soul, and without a word, I ran out of the cafe. I rode back to the community the next day in an old wagon, rattling along the road. Amos drove in silence, and I was grateful. My mind was full of Lauren, her laugh, her eyes, her lips. But I knew I had done the right thing. I could not stay. That longing I felt was temptation, and I fled to save myself. Days in the community moved slowly as always. I worked the fields, helped father mend the fence, and joined the family for evening prayers. But each night, standing on the porch, staring toward the horizon where Lancaster's lights glowed faintly, I felt something had changed in me. The quiet that once soothed me now felt empty. I tried to pray, to ask God to forgive the kiss, that moment of weakness, but no words came. I felt he could see my confusion, and that scared me more than anything. One morning, walking back from the field, I saw Elder Jonas at our house by the mailbox with an envelope in his hand. His face was stern, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. Mother and father stood beside him, their faces heavy, as if they knew something I did not. "Eli," Jonas said, handing me the letter, "this came for you. But I read it. Your parents have too." My heart stopped. I took the envelope, my fingers trembling when I saw the neat handwriting. "Lauren." I opened it, and her words struck like thunder. "Eli." I do not know if you will read this, but I have to try. That kiss, it was incredible. I saw in your eyes that you wanted me, and I know you felt what I felt. I do not understand your world, but I know you are not like them. You can be yourself, Eli. I will wait for you to come back, if you want to. Lauren. I stood staring at the paper. Her words cut me in two. Shame and desire wrestled inside me, and I could not tell which was stronger. I looked at Jonas. His eyes were cold as ice. "This is the devil's temptation, Eli," he said, voice hard as stone. "You return to us, but this letter shows you have not left that world behind. You must choose. Burn this letter and repent before God and the community, or leave and do not come back." Mother gasped, a hand to her mouth. Father lowered his head as if he could not look at me. I stood holding the letter, feeling the ground slide away. Lauren was waiting. She believed I would return. But my community, my home, my parents expected me to stay. My thoughts split apart, and I did not know what to do. The letter in my hands felt light and heavier than anything I had ever held. Time seemed to stop, leaving me on the edge between two worlds I could not join together. The field smelled of damp earth, and the sky hung heavy like lead, ready to rip open with thunder. I stood on the path, clutching Lauren's letter, its edges crumpled from my grip. Her words burned in my mind like a brand. "I will wait for you." Every sound, the whisper of wheat, a distant dog's bark, a wagon creaking over a rise, seemed too loud, too real. But inside me there was a deep, empty well of silence I feared to look into. Elder Jonas stood a few steps away, his stern gaze fixed on me. Mother and father were silent behind me, tense and afraid. The whole community knew about the letter. They knew I was facing a choice that would change everything. Jonas repeated his words, and they fell like stones. "Eli, burn this letter. Repent before God and the community, or go. Forever." His voice was cold. Trembling with anger, he tried to hide behind righteousness. I looked at him, at his gray beard, at the wrinkles carved by years of obedience and faith, and felt something rise in me. Not fear, not shame, but anger. Anger at him, at myself, at this world tearing me in two. "You think it is that simple?" I burst out, my voice louder than I meant. "Burn a letter, forget everything, go back to prayers and fields like nothing happened? You think I can just rip this out of myself?" Jonas narrowed his eyes, lips pressed thin. Mother gasped softly, but I did not turn. I could not bear her tears. Father cleared his throat as if to speak, but his silence said more. "You chose temptation, Eli," Jonas said, voice harder still. "You brought sin from that city. This letter proves it. You stand before us and argue when God sees your soul. Do you think he will forgive someone who wavers between him and the devil?" "What if I do not know where God is and where the devil is?" I shouted, my words hanging heavy as storm clouds. "You say this is temptation, but in that city I felt alive. I do not know if that is sin or a gift, and you all want me to close my eyes and choose what you command." Jonas stepped toward me, and for a moment I thought he would strike me. He stopped, hands shaking with contained rage. "You show contempt, Eli," he said, voice quiet and dangerous like a hiss. "For God, for our faith, for our way of life. If you cannot burn that letter, you are not one of us. Go. Do not return until your soul is clean." I looked down at the letter. The paper was thin and heavy with everything it meant. Burning, it would cut away a piece of myself, the piece that laughed with Lauren, that felt the heat of her lips, that dreamed of more than fields and prayers. Keeping it meant standing against everything I knew. My family, my God, I still feared. Thunder split the sky, and the first cold drops hit the earth. I looked at Jonas, at Mother, at Father, and felt my fingers tighten. Then I began to tear the letter, slowly, strip by strip, until it was nothing but fluttering pieces in my hands. I did not throw them into the fire as they expected. I gathered the fragments and tucked them into my pocket, feeling them crumple under my fingers. They were mine. My temptation, my sin, my choice. "Eli." Mother's voice was full of pain, but I did not turn. I could not. I turned away and walked barefoot across the wet ground, sticking to my feet. The road from the village toward the city was dark, but I knew the way. Every step rang in my head like a hammer blow. Someone shouted behind me, maybe mother, maybe father, but I did not stop. I walked, and the rain fell harder, washing dust from my feet, but not what was inside me. The scraps of the letter in my pocket grew wet, and I thought of Lauren, of her words. I will wait. I did not know if I would go back to her, if I could ever be the person she saw. But I knew I could not stay where every breath would be an apology for what I had felt. Behind me, I heard footsteps heavy, measured. I turned and saw Father standing at the edge of the field, his silhouette dark against the stormy sky. His eyes, always so calm, were full of hurt, and he said nothing. He only looked, and I knew he saw not a son, but a stranger. I wanted to speak, to explain, but words jammed in my throat. I only nodded, a kind of farewell, and walked on. The community was silent. No one called me back, no one ran after me. They knew that from this moment I was no longer one of them. The road ahead was long, and I did not know where it would lead. But I walked on, rain running down my face, mixing with tears I refused to name. The letter's fragments lay in my pocket, and I held to them like an anchor, keeping me between two worlds, the one I had left and the one waiting ahead. Hit like, and don't forget to subscribe. The next story will be even more intense. But if you are under 18, don't even think about clicking next.